absolute honor to call to the stage our next keynote speaker. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Melissa Milanak, founder of Mind Impact Consulting, licensed clinical psychologist, and associate professor at the Medical University of Southern Carolina, MUSC. She will shed light on the subject and present her research. Please put your hands together to welcome her.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. So, I get to talk about the fun of mental health, well-being. I don't do a really great job of standing still, so I'll be walking around a little bit with everyone. I know we've had our amazing panel. We've had some really great presentations. What I want to be able to do today, as briefly and quickly as we can, is just to really get a handle on what are we talking about when we talk about well-being, when we talk about mental health. So, as we jump in here, I know that it lists that I have a number of different hats that you'll hear me talk about. And Vista is an organization that specifically works with businesses, corporations, organizations to do a deeper dive to have the conversation of what is well-being, what's happening within your organization. Let's look at a person on the whole person perspective. We know that when we walk in the door at our job, we're not leaving the rest of our life behind us. Additionally, we know from a mental health perspective that there are so many different aspects and components that are going to play a role. And for many of us, we're on that constant go, 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 that hamster wheel that we don't even stop for a second to recognize the impact that it's having. For all of us in healthcare, especially in the last year, it's been even amped up even more. So the hope for today's presentation, when I was asked to talk, is not only to give you information about applicability for team members, for family, for employees, for patients, but also for us to reflect for ourselves of what we can be doing so we're making sure that we're not pouring from an empty cup as well. As you see from the model here, extensive research on thousands of individuals, what we've been able to find is that when we look at overall well-being, think of overall well-being as life satisfaction, as ability to experience positive emotions, of all these different aspects and components, that there are 5 different elements that play a significant role. We know that there's the workplace well-being, financial, physical, social, and emotional. Additionally, from a workplace and a business standpoint, because we know we have many people here that are thinking about their businesses and running their own organizations, this also has significant impact for burnout, turnover, and engagement. So we're going to touch on it from all these different aspects as well. So as we jump in here and we're thinking about these aspects, I'm going to go through each of these 5, talk a little bit about how it's applicable, what we're seeing, what research is finding, and my goal is for each of you to have a practical take-home of what you can do to slightly begin to see some impact or some change, whether it's for yourself or someone in your life. From an emotional standpoint, some stats that many of us already know, but I'm giving a talk on mental health, we don't want to lose this. We know that 1 in 5 individuals are going to suffer from a mental health disorder annually. We see about 80% through the course of their life. But I want to target that 8 in 10 stat on there. I talked about this briefly yesterday. We know that 8 out of 10 employees will never seek help out of fear and shame. So when we're really thinking through these pieces and what are the conversations that we need to have, what's happening with stigma, and if anybody is interested in some of these slides afterwards, feel free to send me an email. I'd be more than willing to share any of the information, any of the follow-up as well, to make sure if any of it is useful too. So we know that there is this thing called the pandemic that happened. What I want to share with you is what we were finding is that while many people were already having some struggles beforehand, now with the pandemic, through significant research that's being done through many different academic institutions, organizations, we're seeing 2/3 of the population that's now reporting difficulty sleeping, falling asleep, staying asleep, shutting their brain off. Over 85% of individuals talking about worry for safety, for health, for all these other aspects, seeing significant impact on increases in rise in depression and anxiety. We know a lot of this, but we have the science to back it up because that's what's going to be necessary to get funding for programming and for implementation. Some of the stats specifically COVID-related, 22 to 35% when we see with depression, anxiety, insomnia. I have to make sure I mention the increase in substance abuse as well because a lot of people were leaning towards this from a coping standpoint. Even the fact of trying to find ways to be social. Let's do our virtual happy hours. And now we're doing more and more of those and having a little bit more to try to fall asleep, to shut off our brains. We're seeing people struggling for the first time ever. And let's not lose sight of the people that were struggling beforehand and how it's been exacerbated. And we've lost their social support, we've lost the resources, and we've lost the accountability and the check-ins as well as we've had more of this isolation. From a business standpoint, we're seeing significant increases. Now here's what is interesting. I love to highlight this stat. 400 million workdays lost each year to depression alone. This is pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic. So when we're thinking about focusing on well-being, on the importance of these topics and these areas and the focus, every dollar spent was showing a $3 to $5 increase in improvement. Now think how much we're seeing even beyond that in this post-pandemic, hopefully post-pandemic, or as we're getting there, era. But also recognizing the impact, again, from a business standpoint, because while as healthcare providers, yes, we care about the person, the individual, but we need to make sure that the folks that are taking care of the bottom line and want to know the business ROI as well, it's important that we make the case on both sides. Let's look at the whole person and the impact. Additionally, when we talk about it, I like to highlight it from the stress standpoint of recognizing the fact that if we really think about what stress is, we know that stress is truly the fact that the demands are exceeding the resources that are available. That's when we think about stress, think about a stress fracture, think about the pressure of what we have on it. So that's what's then going to be leading so many of us to this burnout that we're seeing. You'll also be seeing a term that's being used over and over again of talking about languishing, about the fact where I always like to highlight that burnout, it's not that you don't care. It's not that you're lazy. It's not that you don't want to work hard. It's just that your demands have exceeded the resources and there's nothing left. If you ran your car and didn't replace the oil, the engine would eventually burn out. It's the same thing with us. Imagine if we took even half of the ability to prioritize recharging ourselves as we do at recharging our phones and our technology, and where we would be at it. Think of for all of us here right now, how much time are we making sure that our phone is plugged in or our technology and that it's always working? Have we been prioritizing that for ourselves? Have we seen other people prioritize it when we talk about it in that direction? So I do want to do something really quickly with everyone here because I know it's early in the morning. We're talking through a conversation, different time zones. So if you all are sitting here right now, I want you to notice where you're sitting, where your shoulders are at right now. And it's going to sound silly in relation to the chair, okay? Now what I want you all to do, take your shoulders, lift them as high to your ears as high as you can. Higher, higher, higher. It's going to tighten my shake a little bit, and then drop them really quickly. What you're going to notice is that your shoulders are going to sit slightly lower than they did a second ago. Something that a lot of psychologists will do and a lot of individuals that do behavioral work, something called PMR, progressive muscle relaxation. When you overly tighten a muscle and then release it, you actually see that by over-tensing it, it actually helps to relieve some of the tension. When you start head to toe and you do that with your eyes and your face, you'll feel like almost you're getting a headache. Your shoulders, it's amazing when you do it with your stomach and you start to feel all this pressure all the way through your body. You can do this in about 2 minutes, head to toe. Not only does it relieve the tension, it sends the message to your brain, okay, there's not a threat, because fight or flight, I'm not in this stressed up, tense state anymore. Think of all of us, we came here this morning, we slept, we're at this conference, we're thinking that everything's great. How much tension was there that we didn't even realize? That's what happens typically when we're dealing with stress. For many of us, we're in this constant state of simmering that we don't even realize. So that fact that it's been day in and day out, we have to make this happen. If I don't go to work, somebody isn't taken care of. If I don't go to work, my employees don't get to have their paychecks. My family's not taken care of. Go, 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 the pressure we put on ourselves, and we hit a false baseline. We think that we're calm and relaxed, but we're at that simmering, which makes it a lot easier to get to boiling. That's where our society was pre-pandemic, and now we're seeing the impact even more, where we're getting to this place where we acclimate to it. I used the example yesterday of being in a smoky bar where you walk in and you're hit with the smoke. Maybe for those that don't smoke, you've walked into the casinos and you smell smoke where you haven't been smelling that as much anymore. And a few minutes later, you acclimate to it because we just become used to it. That's what we've done with stress. And then the stress builds and can, over time, exhaust our systems, turn into anxiety. Then we react versus respond. We get irritated with ourselves. We get frustrated with other people. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is just a simple check for ourselves. Just a quick second of saying, how stressed am I? Where am I right now? It's not going to make us more stressed, but it's going to help you to make that decision. Maybe that's not the best time to stand in line at the DMV or call Comcast or to have an important conversation. But even just to check in with ourselves to say, okay, am I at this point where I'm going to be in my best to respond to challenges? My memory, attention, focus, concentration. If we think about if you've ever had a virus on your computer, for those non-Apple users, and what happens to the computer, right? We start to have, it slows down, the memory isn't as great, things aren't functioning. Well, when that anxiety and stress is running in the background, it's overutilizing our resources, so we can't 100% focus on it. And then it takes us longer to get something done. We're less effective, we're less efficient. Then we start beating ourselves up. We push ourselves to go harder, to work faster. That's where we're seeing a lot of this burnout happen in the last year, where the average employee is extending their workday by at least an hour every day. Because now we're back-to-back meetings. Zoom fatigue is real. We'll keep saying that. And as we're doing the back-to-back, then what we're seeing happen is we don't even have the time to use the restroom, let alone respond to emails, to responses, to see these other things happening. So now we're going to try to work. Maybe we take a break for dinner. We help our kids. Now we're going to work more into the night to try to get ahead of our inbox so that then the next day we're set up for success to just do it all over again. And so there's a lot of these pieces that is part of our everyday. It is that piece, okay, I gotta work, I gotta get hard, I believe in what I'm doing. Amazing. Think how hard it was to take just a few days to really be here and to focus and to disconnect, to actually work on what you can do for yourself as well. And then we start to feel guilty with taking those breaks. So the quick tip in this spot as well is just to take that moment for yourself to say, how stressed am I? Where am I? What can I do? And I have tons of tips and strategies that I'd love to share with you if we had more time about how to de-stress at your desk and things that we can chat about later if folks want to hear it. But I promise to get through the other 4 domains and to keep it to 30 minutes so we can be somewhat on time. So with that being said, the next domain of the model was physical. And there are a number of pieces that I want to highlight. And what I think is really important for us to touch on here is to also recognize that many times when people are talking about wellness and the craze that has started, I'm so glad that people are paying attention to it, but so much becomes just the physical. I want to give the nod to it, I want to make sure that we touch on it, but I don't want to lose sight of the other components as well. From a physical standpoint, we know that diet and exercise are always key important pieces that come through. Not just the exercise piece from the ability to physically be active and healthy, but also from a psychological standpoint. It gives us that opportunity to clear our mind, to focus, to process. As we build up sleepiness, it helps us to be able to fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. And we know that there are all different opportunities that we can access this. Exercise doesn't have to mean that you're training for a marathon. I literally am working with an executive that came out of retirement who sets an alarm and once an hour gets up and does a few laps around his kitchen just to get some physical activity and decompress for a moment. So if you need to get some of that frustration out, we can use exercise for that as well. From a diet standpoint, again, so many experts here that could highlight those pieces. I just really high level want to comment on the fact that we want to watch what we're eating, not just from the health from gaining weight and those pieces, but we know that the caffeines and the sugars and those pieces can actually increase our feeling like we have that fight or flight response, which can actually contribute to us feeling more anxious. Lots of things that are in there that we don't even realize, not to mention the impact that it has on our sleep and those aspects as well. And many people, again, are using to try to rest and relax, which actually, while it may help you to fall asleep, we know that alcohol has a significant impact on repressing your ability to get REM sleep, on quality sleep, on throwing off your GABA glutamate systems. I'll spare the nerddom to this group, but you know where we're going with that. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention sleep. As a person that specializes in sleep, I realize, as I said, my specialty areas, I started in the world of trauma and PTSD, but really now mostly I'm doing a lot of work with sleep anxiety and workplace well-being. But sleep is something that you will hear me on my soapbox for anyone that has had to listen to me talk the last few days. We know that it's important, and the reason I always highlight this when I'm talking about well-being is that we have done everything we can within a society to convince ourselves that we don't need sleep. Snooze, you lose. Time is money. Who's the first one there, the last one to leave? You stayed up all night. You're dedicated. You're there. You're showing that. The one that's tired was the one that was working the hardest, and then we crash. So I feel like I always have to remind individuals and convince them of the fact of why sleep is such an important piece. So yes, we need it for body restoration. We need it for our memory to be where we want it to be. Memory, attention, focus, concentration. It's important for our metabolism as well. So we want to make sure that not just for our immune system, but we're not sleeping well, it's harder to lose weight or maintain healthy weight, that daytime impact and our ability to respond to challenges. So when we're thinking about our sleep, sleep schedules are going to be one of the key things. I don't have the opportunity to go through. Oh, come back. Maybe? There we go. I'm not going to have the time to go through all the pieces on this, but I do just want to highlight that when we're thinking within the physical realm, one of the key things is to have that consistent bedtime and wake time 7 days a week, not being consistently inconsistent and one time during the week and a different on the weekend. You wouldn't eat healthy during the week and then eat all fast food and snacks on the weekend and expect to lose weight. It's the same thing with our sleep. And I will debunk the myth that when we talk about catching up on sleep, you really don't catch up on sleep. If you missed dinner Friday night, you might feel more hungry on Saturday, but if you ate 2 dinners on Saturday, can your body really process all those calories in a helpful way? It's the same thing with sleep. We might feel overly exhausted, but what our body can use and really rejuvenate, it's much better when we have that consistency. And I always highlight the piece of the impact that we know that our technology has. The average American is going to check their phone at least 80 times a day, at least on average every 12 minutes. We see people taking our phones to bed. We can't seem to be disconnected with them, sleeping with them under our pillows, checking them when we wake up at night. If you can pick up your phone and light up an entire room, think about how much light you're getting through your optic nerve into your suprachiasmatic nucleus, that SCN that switches sleep on and off. How many of you are struggling not to check your phone right now because I've just mentioned it and reminded you of it? Right. So I will leave it at that for today, and I'd love to talk with you more about this in the future. Financial well-being. Let's talk about this piece for a second. How does this play in? Well, a few key pieces. We know that financial security is something that can feel subjective to different people, but plays such a role in our mental health and our stress level. Even people from research that are reporting the highest levels of resiliency in the face of stress are showing high relationships to being worried about money, especially with where our economy has been in the last year, responses to the pandemic. What we found is that the perception that you have more than enough to do what you want has 3 times the impact on your well-being versus just your income alone. So that perception that you have enough and more than enough to do what you want. Additionally, we find that buying memories, so sorry ladies, I know there's lots of great shopping here in Vegas and retail therapy happens, but what we find is, and gentlemen as well, I shouldn't make that, but what we do know is that 2 to 3 times increased well-being on buying memories and experiences versus just things alone. The thing eventually wears off. And then, of course, establishing a lot from the quick tip, because I promised I would give one in each segment, that establishing automated systems actually show an increase in that sense of financial well-being, because it's not the constant stress of, okay, I have to pay the bill today, and how much do I have in my account, and where am I at? But even just by automating those things, it's one less decision we have to make that day, and we actually see research show that it increases that sense of financial stability. Also, research shows that spending money on other people, and actually, even if it is the simplest thing of paying for the Starbucks for the person that's in line behind you, that has a significant impact on I'm just tracking my time to make sure I'm pacing, also has a significant impact on that feeling of financial well-being and financial security. Even if it's the smallest thing doing for someone else, that it helps us to have that feel-good factor and contributes to those sense of gratitude. Continuing on, social well-being. How does this play a role and tie into our well-being and our mental health as well? What we find is that looking at personal and professional relationships across has significant impact. And I'm going to talk about the professional in a second within the workplace and professional piece. But what we know here is that having these relationships, we know that social support is such a huge impact factor for protection against our depression, anxiety, when we have better social support, even with severe mental illness. Having these relationships can help us to enjoy life, help us to achieve, to motivate us to be more healthy across all different domains. Additionally, there are ways that we can encourage others through development and growth. Consider the fact of having a walking meeting. So instead of just doing it on the phone, especially as we're getting back into the office to get more active, or if we have to walk from one place to another, taking a meeting where we're both walking and moving to have some of that energy, that exercise, and to encourage and support each other. So investing in the relationships and considering mixing the social time with these other ways to motivate each other actually makes us feel better about ourselves. We're having the impact, we have the accountability, and we have that opportunity to grow there. That's different than just venting and being negative, but sometimes just having someone that we can talk to, it's amazing what that does. Many times we're used to, especially in the healthcare world, we're used to being the ones that everyone else talks to. They talk to us. They come to us. If we think about it, have we ever said, you know, it's harder for me to rely on someone else and to let someone else be there for me. Instead, I'm the one that's there for everyone else. And that feels good. Maybe it is as a parent. You know, I hear people say, you know, the parents don't get to be the ones that are sick and all those different pieces, especially in the last year. But relying on those social relationships, even if it is a quick phone call, it's not the same behind a screen, but to be able to see each other's faces, to have that connection is such a huge protective factor, and we see a significant increase in mental health with those pieces. So, I want to spend a little bit of time within the workplace realm specifically because there are so many different aspects that play here. Whether you are the one running the business, whether you are the one as the team member, and a lot of these things also play a significant role, not just within the workplace, but also within our family environments and those interactions as well. So from the workplace standpoint, we know that there are many different factors that are going to have an impact and an influence on our professional well-being. One of those being meaningful and challenging work opportunities and opportunities for growth. Feeling challenged, feeling like what we're doing significantly matters. Research that we've done at Invista showed that 77% of employees that felt they had meaningful work had higher levels of well-being versus those that did not. I know this is really small print. I don't expect you to be able to read all of these, but I figured I'd share the slides afterwards if folks wanted to see it. But this just talks about ways to feel like your work is more meaningful, creating that why. Maybe it is that person on the assembly line that says, is what I'm doing in this one piece really important? Well, let's look at what that why is. When that piece works, that means the brakes in my car work, which means it keeps me and my family safe. How can we reframe that and take that moment and that second and say, what am I doing that gives me that why? Maybe it's time to ask somebody in senior leadership or someone that we respect to mentor us. It's great to have multiple mentors and people that you can learn from. Find ways to expand your responsibility, to grow new skills that you have. Even if it is the opportunity to enroll and learn something that has nothing to do with your job, it just helps you to feel like you have something, a new challenge that you can take on. We know another area that has an impact is clarity on expectations. This has been a huge one that we've seen over the last year especially. The employees with highest levels have much higher percentage ratings, and we see that as a leader, open dialogue is such a key factor. Even pieces of the fact of saying, okay, well, we've all been on flexible schedules this past year. Maybe you have a boss that sends emails at 10 o'clock at night. Maybe you're the one sending emails at 10 o'clock at night because you work and then you want to spend time with your family, then you want to get ahead or you want to make sure that you put out any fires. Well, then if your team member gets that email late at night, they're going to think the expectation is to respond. So even just explicitly saying the things that you are making assumptions on, the importance of overly communicating is such a key, especially when we're in this digital world with a million emails, every memo, everything that's happening right now. So setting accurate goals. We talk about SMART goals, right? They're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based. If I told somebody to build a house, it's going to feel overwhelming. But if I break it down into concrete pieces of getting the materials and laying the foundation and doing the plumbing and doing the electricity, I can cross off each step as I go. That gives those small wins along the way that help you to have that sense of accomplishment. Even just writing your to-do list for the day and adding to it what you do throughout the day, so when you don't cross everything off, instead of feeling like a failure that you didn't finish it, you realize what else you did, completely shifts the mindset on that. Let's talk about the workload and the work-life balance for a moment. While we have been focusing so much on work overload over the last year, there's also been a lot of people that have struggled with work underload because certain parts of their job haven't been able to get done. They're trying to find ways to feel useful, to make sure that they're not going to lose their job because something isn't happening for them right now. So use this opportunity of where can we improve processes? Are there other tools that we can use? Maybe there's guidance in ways that we can say, if you feel like there is so much of a work overload, going to the person that has the decision making, or for yourself, if you are your boss, your CEO, and what really are the things that need to be prioritized. When there are 10 things on your priority list, nothing's a priority. When you force yourself to number it and actually put it through and you can't have a tie, that really helps you to sharpen your focus and is going to make you more effective and efficient and increase your overall sense of well-being there as well. A few other key pieces and stats. Third of employees are reporting frustrations about reduced ability to be a good partner, parent, or a friend. Almost half are reporting that their family is complaining about how much time they're spending working, and over 65% of employees are frustrated with understaffing. So we want to make sure from a balance standpoint that we are adding work-life balance to these conversations, having this be something in a one-on-one meeting, checking in. Again, just ask how someone is doing, but don't just have it be the box that you're checking. Have it be the genuine question, and then let that person, whether it's a family member, a friend, an employee, answer at the level that they're comfortable with. Discussing the areas where people may be struggling, setting the boundaries, huge one. We don't have to roll out of bed and immediately get onto our technology. We originally used to commute to work and have that time, or the commute after work to decompress. Make sure that we're still factoring those pieces in to give ourselves that decompression time, that mental break, that opportunity to have that balance, to have that de-stress, even that process time. Because otherwise it's going to crawl into bed. It's the first time we've been alone with our thoughts all day. Scary. And it's going to be hard to shut our brain off and actually be able to fall back to sleep. I am a huge proponent of process worry time before bed. Take that notepad and a pen. On the right-hand side, write everything you have to do the next day, your to-do list. Because otherwise you're going to lay in bed and start thinking about it. Have you ever tried to turn off your computer and it says such and such running in the background because the hardware is ready to shut down but the software isn't? Your brain's going to be working that same way. After you write your to-do list, then on the left-hand side, brain dump everything running through your mind. Set a timer. Do it for at least 5 minutes without picking up the pen. It's going to feel exhausting and the longest thing ever, but your brain's going to be able to empty out so you can set it on the nightstand, get into bed, and really have that chance to fall asleep. Train your brain that it doesn't get to worry in bed. Just like you put the puppy outside to potty outside, we're going to put the worries outside of the bed. Lots of different things we can be doing here. So that's where prioritizing your needs and recognizing that self-care isn't a selfish thing. It's actually a necessity that we need in order to make sure that we can really be achieving what we want to focus on. Last few bits and pieces. I know I only have a few minutes left. I want to talk about the training opportunities piece. We talked before about the skills, about the opportunities, and that why. We know that recent research is showing that poor training can lead to turnover. It's been really hard to onboard people, especially in a remote environment. So just paying extra attention to those resources. And employees are not going to want to ask because they don't want to look incompetent. They don't want to ask the question because they don't want you to fire them or think that they're not needed or that they can't do their job. So overly checking in is going to be a really key important piece, especially as we're transitioning back to work and setting up these hybrid work environments. Last few things from a job security standpoint, we know that as with performance and intention to quit are significantly related to job security. The more secure they feel, the more performance we're going to see. When job insecurity goes up, my slides are different on the screen. When job insecurity goes up, turnover goes up. When job satisfaction goes down, we see the organizational commitment and the intention to quit going up. So some keys there. Perceptions of fairness and respect are going to be other aspects that play a really key role in the workplace environment and our overall mental health and well-being. We know that perception is reality. So employees that feel that there's fairness, 26% higher in terms of well-being. Transparency is a key piece here. I included some tips to have the conversation because a lot of employees don't always know how to go about that, how to voice their needs. And so I usually, when I do these, we'll talk about organizational as well as what individuals can do. Because even for us, maybe it's having a conversation with an investor. Maybe it's having a conversation with our employees. We know that even if it's a hard conversation, we don't always have to have all the answers, but the genuineness and the authenticity is going to translate in so many other ways. It takes the pressure off. It creates a better environment. You're going to see much more engagement, as well as it's going to help with reducing turnover pieces. Autonomy is another aspect. Let your team members and folks feel like they have a say. When they've bought into the goal, if you have a question, instead of immediately saying, this is what we're going to do, be open to having the opportunity to hear from what other people have to say, their opinions. You might be surprised what suggestions you get, and then when people feel bought into it, you're going to see that it feels less like the job, more like it's something that they really are invested in, and you see that increase in engagement as well as effectiveness and efficiency. That's where the quality of the relationships come in. We spend over 90,000 hours at work, over a third of our lives with our coworkers. How can we create the opportunity to have those environments, those quick water cooler breaks and opportunities to have the conversations, especially in hybrid work environments, especially if we're go, go, go and we're having all the separation? being present, even if it's a short moment or an interaction. Recognizing that the difference in perspectives can actually help us to grow and strengthen the opportunities, and we don't have to take all the pressure on ourselves to get everything figured out. Many times we don't delegate because we think it's just faster, but over time then we have more and more separation. So when we establish that common goal, it also helps with the coworker relations, which we know is a big piece of that social well-being as well. So my last kind of take-homes for this group: self-care is not selfish. We can't pour from an empty cup. We hear all these phrases, put your mask on first, takes a whole different connotation when we're thinking through the pandemic, but there's a reason for that it's not selfish to make sure that you are in the place to be fully functioning and fully present and aware. Make sure we're recharging our bodies, not just our phones, staying connected while staying safe, not isolating. Let's talk about making lemonade out of lemons. What are some ways that we truly can turn this around to see opportunities for growth, for expansion, to reevaluate, letting where we're at right now in the current moment be that gift that we have for us, instead of just the fact of what is always happening, ruminating on the past, or where do I have to go in the future, but being able to be in that present moment. We'll see that reduction in anxiety and stress when we're able to focus there. And then, of course, being positive, gratitude, what do we have, that reframe in those pieces. So don't forget that utilizing resources shows strength, encouraging others to access that, and also for ourselves. I was very honored to be a part of our resiliency program at our hospital during the pandemic, providing free mental and emotional support to all of our care team members and helping folks to realize that it takes more strength to sometimes seek support and to use those resources than to try to do it completely yourself. Let's think of the advice we give to others and how we can apply that to ourselves as well. So back to the model, we've covered a lot in 30 minutes, the emotional, physical, financial, social, and workplace. I hope that you've been able to take a few quick tips from this. I'll make sure that I have my email and website up on the screen. I'd love the opportunity to have more of a conversation with all of you about it, and thank you for letting me share part of your morning.